This is sort of Chery's more premium brand.
It's gonna sit alongside the existing
JQ and Chery models, but it'll
sit at that slightly higher point in the mainstream. Now this LA is going to be the brand's biggest model in Europe,
and it's about the same sort of size as a Tiguan. In fact,
bigger,
it's slightly
but isn't gonna want to be selling you this car
based on the fact that it's cheaper than a VW,
because they think it's gonna be just as good
and even more premium inside. Okay, so inside the cabin,
this is where Lepas is really going to town with that sort of premium
because
vibe.
It feels really quite
some to us in here. Actually, they're going fundamentally for the dashboard.
Sort of layout.
They're going for something that's quite high tech.
Some
so
big
waterfall screen they call it, which is similar to some
that
other
we're
systems
seeing in
other thousand this segment.
And even though it does look like a lot of the main
controls are sort of fashioned inside of the UI, we still have some pretty
functions
keys
here, such as temperature and volume.
The other thing that I like as well is that the screen in front of
sort
the driver
fits really nicely
inside of this quite funky looking steering wheel. Now, of course, just like the outside, this one's in a pretty funky
which is a
colorway.
sort of nice caramel
color, and it really does lift the cabin ambience. But most of these probably be fine in a sort of dark color. Took the space. This is fundamentally a C-segment SUV, so it's gonna sit smack bang with cars like the Volkswagen
It's
Tiguan.
not quite as big as these sort of new Stellantis product cars, so things like the Pajero 3008.
But the slight boxy shape does mean that you're gonna have
both
plenty
here in
of
the front
space seat and also the back. Okay, in the back seat, this is classic Chinese car in all the right ways, because space in here is enormous.
Now this seat is in my position, which doesn't really
tell you very much because I'm not a very tall person. Space is load like acres. There's acres of space. I've got loads of legroom.
There's loads of width as well. The seats are
wide,
relatively,
and even though this is a plug-in
rather than
hybrid,
a full BEV,
the floor is completely flat, which means that you will fit three
very
across
nicely.
The other thing to know as well is that much like the materials are just plush and nice, and everything feels quite upscale. There's definitely loads of show
to it also.
Did you know that you can actually buy and sell your car at AutoTrader?
So if that's something that you want to do, make sure you click the link in the description below and we'll walk you through the process.
What is a Lepas L8 like to drive? Well, we're gonna caveat all of this by saying that we're
a Chinese
driving
spec or an unfinished spec, I hear.
In China, so those specifications will change slightly when they arrive into the UK.
But what we do know is that it's gonna run with a plug-in hybrid system that is pretty familiar. Chery and a motor in other products as well.
So that means that under the skin we have a combination
of a 1.5-liter 4-cylinder engine
and some electric motors,
as well as a battery pack
around 18 kilowatt hours.
And together they produce 279 brake horsepower and 365 Newton
which I think
meters
you'll
of
agree
torque
is pretty good
for the class, and also
what this car's eventual price point will be
now
as well.
In terms of calibration and stuff like that.
Still
obviously
lots to figure out
in terms of the final UK spec, but fundamentally
it is a really easy car to drive. There's lots of
so the progression to
and
the
also
throttle.
There's pretty good regen as well. Looking out, we've got really good visibility up front. The sort of dashboard is nice and low,
is
and
quite
also
square
the bonnet and quite upright, which means that you can actually
even if
see
you're quite a short driver, you can see it quite easily.
There's
ahead
also really good
from
visibility
mirrors and also behind me as well. In terms of efficiency, again not finalized, but
Lepas is saying that this is gonna get around
to 55 miles
on electric power alone, which is pretty impressive, which will then obviously extend much further
when it comes to the petrol engine getting involved.
Chery does actually have DC fast charging capability,
plug-in
system,
hybrid,
which is a real bonus for when you
out
are
of bat, but this
long range efficiency really is, they're hoping, going to be a sort of USP when it eventually does arrive. So first impressions, things are pretty good. I think it's important that we reiterate that these are pre-production
and they're
cars,
not exactly
representative of the cars that will arrive
in September this year. However, I do think that Lepas
still has quite a lot of work to do in order to convince buyers used to their Tiguan that this is a better buy. Effectively, once we reach this sort of price point,
the little things start becoming very important.
Yes, it has the tech, and yes, it's got a nice
screen, but it starts to be about how it works
rather than just the toys on offer. I also think that it's
important
really
that cars like this
incredibly
drive
well, because the Tiguan
is actually
really good even in its sort of
heavier plug-in state. The Lepas
still has some work to do in the ride and handling characteristic side, and also in terms of just general desirability. At the end of the day, if you have to explain to someone
what this is
as opposed to your Volvo or your Volkswagen,
then you've
already lost half the battle. Chery is a fast-moving company, and this Lepas brand is going to definitely be taking
in every single piece of positive and negative feedback
that we give it over the next few months. Will this car really make an impact when it arrives?
Later this year we'll have